Welcome to Inside College Admission, conversations with admission leaders about matters affecting the college-going process. My name is Peter Van Buskirk, and I am joined today by Kevin Mathis, Dean of Admission at Bucknell University. And I have to claim that not only is he Dean of Admission at Bucknell University, he's Dean of Admission at my alma mater. So Kevin, welcome.
Thanks so much, Peter. Happy to join you today.
Oh, it's great that you could work us into your schedule, because I would imagine your day is full of Zoom meetings right now.
We are doing a lot of virtual work at this point.
Who, now, given your time in admission, you know that this time of the year, April is sort of when admission officers come out of the dark recesses of their offices. They've let the letters of the decision letters out, and kids are excited, and now you want to kind of hug each other and embrace this class of 2024, and then you've still got a whole bunch of other students who are a year younger who'd like to get started. But in my experience, April is sort of a celebratory month. It's hard to celebrate right now, isn't it?
I think it's hard to celebrate in the ways we traditionally do. You know, we tend to get together as a team to celebrate decision letters going out. We have events on campus to celebrate the accepted students. And we've really just had to shift what that looks like this year. So I think for my team, we're still trying to have those moments of joy, but just in very different ways than we have in the past. So, you know, we did a Zoom celebration when our decisions went out, and my entire team of 24 were all on a Zoom call, and we saw each other, and we were just, you know, happy to be with each other. And for our students, it's about reimagining how we can allow them to engage with the Bucknell community when they can't actually do it in person and physically.
Yeah, I'm curious. When were you able to send your letters out? I mean, and I'm not asking for your strategy necessarily, but I'm curious to see how your mail date matches up with the events in the world.
It was really interesting, Peter. We tend to be on the later side of releasing. So our release date was March 26th. And what happened in Pennsylvania was my team and my colleague, Andrea Stoffer, who's the director of financial aid, we were furiously getting packets ready to go out. And on March 19th, the governor of Pennsylvania declared that all non-life sustaining businesses had to shut down. So we were actually 2 days away from our packets being ready to go in the mail, and we had to stop. So they're all sitting in our offices right now.
Oh no.
Just collecting dust, essentially. So we did an online release only this year. So everything that our accepted students got was all in their accepted student portals. And we're basically waiting to get a clear at some point to be able to send those good, happy physical packets out at some point. But it really did change how we even did our decision release this year.
Oh my goodness. Wow. So, all right, you started to stay home on March 19th?
Yeah, that night. So the 19th was the last day I was actually in the office.
Now you're close enough. You could kind of sneak out after dark and walk up to your office, right?
If I really wanted to, I could.
Well, so is there any activity on campus now, or is it completely shut down?
It is pretty much completely shut down. So we were an early university in terms of going to remote learning for the rest of the semester. That happened over our students' spring break. And so students had a few days to come back to campus and collect their things and move out. And we did allow, we had a petition process. So there are currently under 200 students still on campus. So we're still providing food. Our student health services and public safety are still on campus. So we have essential personnel still operating the campus to keep our students safe and healthy. But even though they're on campus, they are still doing remote learning from their residence halls. So there's even though they're on campus, there isn't an in-person class. Our faculty are at home. So they're teaching from their homes, and the students are still learning from an online session, even in residence hall. So
Wow.
It's a very different experience than what they're used to.
Wow. Now, from your point of view, in terms of accepting and enrolling in the class of 2024, what are some of the pandemic-related challenges that you've had to deal with and continue to deal with as you try to think about how can we get this class nailed down?
I think the thing on everybody's mind is the unknowns that are still out there.
Exactly.
You know, as campus leaders, we're being asked by our partners across campus, how's the class looking? What are you working on? How do you think it's going to just shake out? And I think for the first time in our careers, we can truly say we don't know. So we are thinking about things like, how do we emulate the visit experience in a virtual platform? So for Bucknell, we created the Bison to Bison community, which is set up through a group we signed on with called Wiser. So it's a great platform where we can do some live sessions with faculty and staff on campus. There's chat features, there's message boards. So we've got a lot of our current students, our faculty, our staff working in that space and trying to convey the Bucknell experience as best we can to our admitted students. We also included their parents and guardians. So there's an option for them to interact with current Bucknell parents. So that was one step we took to try to think about some of that work. But then the other piece that I think the pandemic is really showing is how do we think about funding higher education? So a lot of families, when they applied to colleges, had a plan in place to be able to afford education. And that may have taken a big hit recently.
Those
And I
plans
think
aren't worth much now.
I'm sorry, what was that,
Those
Peter?
those plans aren't worth much now.
Right, right, exactly. And I think that, um, we still don't know the full effects of that. So we get into the space of how are we working with families if they have questions about their aid packages, and how do we still try to make Bucknell a place that's affordable and a place that their student can feel safe and that we're a good institution to still choose in their college process.
From an enrollment perspective, though, and you talked about the unknowns.
Mm.
There's so many factors that you like to be able to count on from year to year to year that you use in establishing your predictive models, and those factors just are not reliable right now. Um, is, is this a year where we have to kind of allow for the possibility that the enrollment process for the seniors will extend right up until September?
I think we have to be fully ready for our work to continue later into the summer than is typical for certain subsets of the colleges and universities out there. Um, right now there are a number of institutions that have changed their deposit deadline to June 1st. At Bucknell, we kept May 1, but given the timing of our notification, we were actually able to put in our admit letter language that says if May 1 is not a tenable date for you and your family, please be in touch because we can be flexible with when we can get a deposit date. So we tried to really think and be thoughtful about how can we help families come to a decision, but if they need more time, how do we give them more time and work with them? So I do think that there is a notion that work that typically wrapped up in May will likely not wrap up in May this year. It will likely go into June, and then I think depending on how enrollments shake out for institutions, could it go into July and up until classes enroll and start? It might. So I think that we're trying to keep an eye on how deposits are tracking and what are we hearing from families and how do they think their college experience might be altered given what's going on, and how that might alter the work that we're doing. So we're gonna try our best to I think move things along in a way that makes sense for families and our institutions, ourselves, but I think that we're prepared to be working into the summer more than usual.
Is this going to be the year of the wait list? I mean, wait list has always been out there, but theoretically, it's the insurance policy. And if ever we needed insurance policies, it's this year.
That's a really good question. I think we'll find out in early May,
Mm.
because for a number of schools, still did keep a May 1 date and maybe aren't going to be as flexible. So, we might see some action happening earlier and get some fallout about waitlist opportunities earlier. It also depends what schools chose to do, uh, if they were releasing at a time when they could actually alter decisions. So I'll be really upfront with Bucknell. We still had a bit of time as this was happening to change some of our thoughts about our acceptances. So we ended up admitting an extra 150 students about a week before letters went out, because we had that opportunity and we said, this is not a year to think about, you know, trying
Yeah.
to really manage acceptance rates and say, oh, if we need 100 off the wait list, we can do it. I mean, this is a year where we really thoughtful about saying we need to put our best foot forward. So we were comfortable admitting more students and saying, you know what, we do want you, and we know this is a strange year, and we tried to buffer ourselves a little bit, but not all schools did that. So I think some, it'll be interesting to see, if they did business as usual, are they still going to be okay with their numbers, or are they going to end up digging deeper into their wait list because it's not working out this year? So, I think late April, early May, we'll have a better sense of what's going to happen with waitlist work this year.
Oh, it's interesting. In some of my earlier conversations, I heard um, revelations that waitlist had already moved at some schools.
Mm.
So, and your situation, I think you, if I might, you did something that is very prudent, and that was to say, well, if we're likely to take kids, we might as well take them now, rather than later, and give ourselves a better chance of enrolling them. So, don't envy it. This is going to be a sort of an unending summer. I'm afraid, and I'm excited for Bucknell that you're in a good place, and it should land well for you, but it's not going to be easy, I'm afraid. Um,
It's
Now,
not, and I think it'll be, this is, I think, a year that we'll really start to see what institutions can do, and I think that there are conversations happening at all campuses about, uh, is this year where you maybe aren't going to hit the number that you want, and what does that look like as an institution? So I know our president at Bucknell has mentioned that to our own faculty and staff. He has said admissions and financial aid are going to work as hard as they can to get our incoming class target, but you can't model a pandemic. So this might not be a year where we can
right.
really flesh out, like, is it going to hit the number we want? Are we going to be, are we going to be above the number? Are we going to be below the number? So we're just trying to prepare for every scenario we can think of.
Absolutely. Well, you touched on the financial piece just a
Mm.
little bit ago, and there are obviously going to be families that felt one way about their relative abilities to pay for college as recently as January and early February, but now their circumstances have changed. How do you deal with that? I mean, I know you'll hear appeals, but if 20% of, and I'm making a number up, but if 20% of your admitted students show up with a demonstrated, documented need of greater assistance, is that something that you can help with? Or you take a deep breath and say, we'll figure it out. Yeah, we'll do it now, figure it out later. Or how does that work?
Well, for Bucknell, I have great colleagues in the Office of Financial Aid, and they're going to work their hardest to make it manageable, and they work really closely with our finance office to figure out what is tenable financially for the institution. What can Bucknell do? Is this a year where we could potentially increase our aid budget? Does it need to stay right on the dollar figure we were given back in January in terms of how much we could spend on financial aid? And working within those parameters. So we're trying our best to work with families, and if they have, I think what you said, Peter, is really critical: a documented financial need. I think that's the biggest piece, is that you know a family may say to us they need more financial assistance, but if there's no documentation to support that, our teams can't do much to alter the situation. So we always encourage families to give us more information. What are the things that are happening? What can we document to say this is why?
Mhm.
So we're gonna try our best, and I think as an institution, we're going to be watching how many families are in that position, and how do we think about our enrollment and the target number of students that we want, and do we need to alter some things in order to make those pieces all come together? So I think the toughest thing for everybody right now is that there just aren't good answers to some of the questions, because continuing it's a continuation to monitor the situation, to see where you are, and then adapt to what's happening. So it feels like, as much as we want to give concrete answers, what we could say today could change in a week. And I think that's the toughest part for, not just families, but I think for everybody in the enrollment field.
Now, before all of this happened, the coronavirus and the economic issues, the Department of Justice threw us a curveball as well by basically taking the lid off of deadlines and encouraging families to shop around, if you will, and frankly opening the door for some institutions, if they want, to go after kids who've already committed to other schools, which some people have referred to as a Wild West kind of a scenario that could emerge here. Do you see that possibly happening, and might it affect your planning at Bucknell?
So when we got together as an enrollment team this year after the decision had been made by NACAC to strike some of that language from our code of ethics and principles of good practice,
Yeah.
We decided that we should go for more deposits than usual. So we typically saw about 5% of our admitted students end up either getting off a wait list somewhere else or change their mind over the summer. And we decided to go bigger than that this year. We were modeling, why don't we expect 6.5%? Because with all the unknowns out there and how students may still be contacted later into the summer, let's err on the side of, we'll take more students, we'll take more deposits. And then if this does happen, we aren't scrambling in July to try to make up students that have suddenly decided to go somewhere else. So I don't know how everybody else has handled it, but that's what we've thought of. And I think given the pandemic, I think there's a greater chance that schools will continue to recruit students, because if you're an institution that is suddenly really struggling to enroll students because of what's going on, I could see some places being more aggressive with trying to recruit and make up the number of students that are now not coming. And then, as we talked about earlier, that could go later into the summer. So I think it's going to have a trickle down effect to a degree of where does it start and how does it start moving through the ladder of institutions and how it starts affecting us.
Very good. It's again adds to that uncertainty, and another piece of the uncertainty with regard to this particular class is that to what extent will parents decide that maybe they want to keep their kids closer to home? And again, I don't envy you having to kind of put your hand on that crystal ball and then figure things out. Now you've got these kids who've been admitted. They're excited. They want to come to campus. It's a beautiful campus, especially in the springtime, and you can't wait to show it off. And no, you can't do that. The governor said no. So how are you accommodating the kids who would like to have that in-person experience now? The kids were admitted.
Yeah, it's we're looking at a couple. The big thing that we're doing is that bison to bison community through our online platform. And I think thankfully, Bucknell's a place that it has a good 360 virtual tour. So, you can see some great pictures of campus, and it's not just a photo, you can move around and see a whole different view of the quad if you're standing on it. But we still recognize that's not the same as actually physically being here in person. And so we're trying to think about how can we communicate through our people what the experience is like. And, again, the big unknown is I think some institutions are hopeful that they can maybe have folks come to campus in May if everything starts to slow down. And we just, again, we don't know if that's going to be an opportunity. I mean, the latest update from Pennsylvania is last night, the governor said we have a shelter in place order until April 30th. So now the whole month, my team is now going to be at home and we can't go to campus and we can't welcome folks to campus. So, I'm coming from a place of if we're at home until April 30th, I don't know if May is going to be an option anymore. So I think for us, it's about how can we use our other resources that we have with virtual tours and photography and our social media. We have a great Instagram account at Bucknell, and it's I Am Ray, and I Am Ray is actually a student-run Instagram account. So we never, as staff,
okay, you have to help everybody. You and I know who Ray is, but you want to explain I Am Ray?
Sure. So Ray is Ray is the Bucknell chant. We say Ray Bucknell, which is a shortened version of hooray. So we have this great Instagram account called I Am Ray. And what we love about it is that it's completely student run. So there's some great student run stories that have happened throughout the year. So I think that's a great way that an admitted student or even a prospective student could see what a Bucknell experience is like. And then we're still going to do that a little bit. So we're going to have some current students do run the I Am Ray account from their homes, wherever they are right now. So I think we're trying to be creative with how we can tap into some of those things we've already done and students might be interested in interacting with to get a sense of the experience.
If the governor says on May 1st, okay, you don't have to stay at home, and the health experts are saying, you know what, as long as you maintain a reasonable social distance, everything's okay to open up. How long does it take, do you think? And you've never done it before, but what is, in your imagination, how long do you think it'll take to get your campus looking and acting like normal? The look is easy, but the acting.
Yeah, I feel really fortunate to be at Bucknell because the amount of support that we have in the enrollment division is pretty incredible. You know, when the minute the word came out that we were going to have to stop our admitted student programming, you know, faculty and staff were emailing us saying, what can we do to help? How can we help you engage with students? So when we do get the clear, and I know we're going to get it at some point. I'm a very hopeful and positive person. When we are given that okay that we can go back to work, I think that we're an institution that will be ready to welcome folks the minute that happens. Now the difference is it's going to be a different experience because I'm working through the things of we're given the okay, but we might not have student tour guides yet. So, and you know, it might be where we can welcome folks to campus, but it's not the traditional experience we typically do. But I think that we'll be able to move pretty quickly. We might not be as pristine because I don't think we're mowing lawns at this point and things like that. So it might look a little different than usual. But I think that, you know, we'll be able to jump pretty quickly into letting folks be on campus once we're given that clear.
Good, good. Much of our conversation so far is focused on activity directed at engaging the students who've just been admitted. As I suggested at the outset, there are probably thousands, tens of thousands of young people who are at the starting line just eager to get going with this process. So you no sooner have one class put to bed, almost, and then you have to be pretty actively engaged in planning and executing plans for the next class. And for years past, that's involved staff going out on the road to visit high schools, going to college nights, college fairs, open houses, etc. Right now, it's hard to know what you can plan for the fall. What do you, have you had those thoughts and conversations with your staff yet?
I have actually. You know, nothing concrete yet, but about a week ago, I was chatting with my colleague who is in charge of overseeing our domestic recruitment, and I said to him, you know, Ben, I need you to start thinking about what do we do if we can't physically visit high schools and do college fairs in the fall, and also think about what happens if it's only for part of the fall, because what if we're told we can't travel in September, but we can in October? How do we think about all those different situations? So, you know, he has been tasked with starting to think about that because it's going to be really important. I said the same thing to my colleague Brett, who oversees our international recruitment. I said, Brett, we need to think about what happens if we can't travel internationally this year. Or again, what if it's only for part of the fall travel season? So we pivoted really hard to changing all of our admitted student programming to virtual programming. And now that we've actually launched it, I think we're able to start thinking about some of those next steps for the current juniors and sophomores and start to do some planning. So we're trying to start thinking about how to engage with younger high school students who are eager to get started with their process and get some things out there. The thing we were able to do pretty quick, we actually ended up doing our admissions information session online. So we put it on YouTube. We put it on our website under our visit page to just say, you know, here's the intro you typically get when you visit Bucknell. We're going to put it out there so there's something to go on right now. And then we want to think about some other ways that we could maybe connect with students in the next couple of months, and then in the fall, what that might look like.
I just remember from my days in admission long ago that it was really hard to move off of things we always did. You know, there's we always did it that way. And whenever there was a good idea, you could never replace an old idea with a good idea. You just added it on. Uh, are you finding that maybe this is an opportunity to do some subtraction?
I think it is. This is when I think about what we're experiencing right now, when we have the ability and the time to reflect on what happened this spring, and what we were able to accomplish, I think this is a great time to then take the data you have and analyze it to say, did we do some things that worked in this new space virtually that we haven't been doing? And does that allow us to maybe replace some of the other things that we do with this new type of experience?
Mhm.
And I imagine a lot of my colleagues will think about that, because we all know that as our applicant pools become more national and international, it means that we have more and more students considering us that maybe can't do the traditional on-campus experience or the traditional, meet with an admissions officer at your high school. So this is our time to think about, what did we offer that can reach every student out there, and can we keep some of it in in our ranks to be able to pull out and do again next year, so that every student can have a good opportunity to engage with us.
Mhm. Well, it's better left, I think, in the hands of the younger generation,
Mm,
because the recently out of college set has been living in sort of virtual world in many other ways.
mm.
So this is a natural transition, I would imagine.
Yeah, it is, and I'm I'm hopeful that we see some positive results with the pieces that we're doing,
Hmm.
that we can maintain some of them next year. And I don't think we'll have to maintain all of them, because we'll be able to bring some of the traditional pieces back. But I'm a huge advocate of my team coming to me with new ideas and changing what we're doing. And this is just a giant experiment that we had to do all at once. And we will take the time to assess it and then figure out what our best practices are moving forward, and how we can maybe change how we do things moving forward.
Good for you. Now, as I've talked with juniors, uh,
Mhm.
kids who are eager to get going in this process, one of the things that's a point of consternation for them is testing.
Mhm.
They got started in the fall with the SAT or the early ACT, and then maybe they had a regular SAT or ACT in the winter, and they saw the result and they thought, well, I need to get my verbal up or my math up, whatever. Um, and all of a sudden, those opportunities to get whatever score improved aren't there any longer, at least not in the foreseeable future. Um, how is Bucknell thinking of accommodating those students? I mean, the kids who might be approaching you with credentials that for them are somewhat incomplete. They just didn't have a chance to have the multiple test experience.
Absolutely. I'm really thankful that last year, the enrollment team worked with our committee on admissions and financial aid, so faculty and staff and some current student representatives.
Mhm.
And we spent a year and a half uh, throwing around the idea of a test optional policy. And last February, we got approval from the faculty to do a 5-year pilot.
Oh
So
my.
this class right now that we're working with was the first test optional class that we had. And I'm really thankful that we have that in place, because for current juniors and even sophomores who are thinking about starting to try testing, we're a school that we won't need it for them. So if they're worried about uh, not having a test score or trying to improve a score, and they don't think they're going to be able to sit to try to do that, we're a place they can consider, that they could say on the application, no, I don't want you to consider my test score, and we're going to be okay with that.
Now, may I ask, for the kids who applied test option,
Mhm.
what did that do for you and your colleagues as readers of the application? I mean, was it still there for you to see, but you just were supposed to ignore it, or just wasn't there at all? And if it wasn't there at all, how were you approaching? Did you find yourself approaching the candidates differently at all?
Yeah, so my experience, the first institution I ever worked for was St. Lawrence University in Northern New York,
Hmm.
and St. Lawrence is a test optional school. So I always say I'm thankful for my background, because I grew up working for a test optional school. So when Bucknell implemented it, it was more old hat for me.
Hmm.
But for some of my colleagues, they had never worked at a school that was test optional. So in my experience, what we decided to do is we actually suppressed the test scores altogether.
Hmm.
So even if a student self-reported them on the common application or the coalition application, if they on the Bucknell supplement said, no, I don't want my scores considered, we actually suppressed that page so we couldn't see it at all. Now, I like to be transparent. Did test scores sneak through a little bit? they did because there's still some schools that put them on the transcript. So in those few instances, they still showed up. But when we did our training, we said, if a student has said they're test optional, if by some minuscule way that the test score sneaks through, you don't consider it, don't put it in
Yeah.
your read, don't talk about it, because they have told us how they want us to read their file. And I think for me, what I really want students and families to understand is that the application provides us a lot of information. There's a lot of information they give us between the general application and then what we get with the transcript and the school report and the recommendations. So I think sometimes the hardest thing to believe is that when we don't have a test score, it doesn't change how we review the application. Basically what happens is one data point lifts out and you use the rest of the data points you have and the narrative and the qualitative pieces to still make your decision. So when I talk to students, I say to them, if you choose to be test optional, what you need to understand is that then all the academic weight is on your transcript. So the course curriculum that you've chosen to pursue as a high school student, how you've performed in those classes, we're going to rely on the narrative of your teachers and counselor to tell us a little bit about who you are in an academic environment. If you submit testing, it's one extra piece on that academic profile to consider. But if we don't have it, you're using a 3.5-year record of high school performance. And if you're really confident in that and feel like that's a really good representation of who you are, you're going to be fine applying test optional somewhere.
I have to say, and this isn't about me, but I find that in my professional experience, one of the greatest joys I had was being able to admit students who, according to the numbers, may not have been admittable. And those students, once admitted, became rock stars. I mean, they were just really good. That doesn't mean you can admit every student who's applied test optional,
Right.
but once the specter of testing went out of the picture for us in our process, it was a much different evaluation. And so I would imagine you had a lot of fun. I also suspect your faculty will not turn back. I think they'll like the students you get.
I hope not. One of the interesting things about our policy is that we're actually going to ask all of our enrolled students to submit testing, even if they were test optional,
Mhm.
because our institutional research colleagues are gonna start to see how are test optional students doing at Bucknell compared to those that submitted testing.
Yeah.
When we did a 5-year pilot, so we can have a year of graduation data to look at that. And I think we looked at a lot of studies that said the differentiation is not there. And I think we want to do that internally, but my hope is that in a few years when we have the data, we can say, you know what, hopefully we can just keep this policy. But for now, 5 years, but we'll see where we go in the next couple.
Good for you. I'm glad you're carrying the banner for test option.
Yeah.
Wonderful stuff. Um, One of the things that I find myself reflecting on in conversations like this, reflecting as well, is how things are changing. And we talked a bit earlier about all the new ideas that are coming into play. We also probably in our normal conversations with colleagues talk about, well, when things get back to normal, um, hmm, will we be doing business as usual at a point in future that once all the storm clouds of the disease have gone away, or will we have allowed ourselves to create a new paradigm?
I hope we don't go back to business as usual, to tell you the truth, because I think that I've been in the admissions profession for 11 years now,
Mhm.
and I've worked. Bucknell's the third institution I've worked for, and all of us do a lot of the same type of work. And as a profession, we do. We go out on the road, we read files, we do programming on campus, and I think that we've all had to innovate very quickly. And my hope is that we don't lose that, and we don't lose sense of the idea that we can innovate and connect with students in new and different and unique ways. I still want to do some of the things we do. I think they're still incredibly useful, but I hope that we don't fall back into old patterns just because they're comfortable.
Mhm.
I want us as a profession to hopefully push the envelope and continue to think about how can we think about recruiting a class in a different way? What are the platforms we can be using to do that? How can we even consider applications differently? Because I feel a lot of institutions are starting to think about test optional because of everything going on, and places that maybe never thought about being test optional are now taking that on for a year or two to just see, can we do it? And if they do, maybe that's going to be a huge paradigm shift for us. So I'm I'm hopeful that good things will come out of this, and we will talk about it at conferences and with each other, and it will spur further energy to change the profession that we're all in.
That's a very hopeful and positive perspective, and I appreciate it very much. It's a and perhaps a microcosm, not a real small microcosm of what we're seeing in our world in general right now too. That perhaps out of chaos will come, greater quality of life and opportunity. So, in wrapping things up, if you were to talk with a high school junior who just happened to cross your path right now, and you could see the sense of bewilderment in that young person, this is supposed to be a happy time of looking at colleges, but I can't do this, can't do that. What advice would you have for that rising high school senior right now?
I would say to still be positive. As I think about, as I mentioned, my little over a decade of experience, there's a lot of great information still out there, a lot of great resources still out there.
Mhm.
But while some of the traditional things can't happen at this moment, you still have the capability to really start to understand colleges. And I think delving into their websites, taking advantage of the virtual opportunities that they're offering, reading some articles about what current students are doing, what faculty are researching, and how they're engaging with each other. This is a moment where you can realign the time you would have spent in traditional physical visits uh, in new ways, and I really want to encourage students to think about that. The other piece too is, my team is happy to chat with students. As I've talked to colleagues out at other institutions, we as admission officers really want to be helpful as much as we can. So
Mhm.
this is also that moment where it's okay to email us, or call our offices. Even though we're not there, we'll check our voicemail and get back to you. But we are still a resource that students can use, even it's not in the way that we typically interact. So I'd still really encourage them to start their college process. The other thing I've seen is that some families are really paying attention to how institutions are reacting to the COVID-19 pandemic, and I think it shows what we're doing and what we're considering, how we're keeping our students and faculty and staff safe. So I think there's a lot of information you can garner right now to help direct you in your college search process, so that when you can get onto a campus or we can meet in person, you maybe have some great questions to ask us, or you're a little more knowledgeable about the place you're visiting before you actually set foot on campus.
I think that's great advice. And my personal sense is that over the last 10 to 20 years, the approach that many families bring to the process is uh, more or less superficial and
Mhm.
emotionally and socially driven rather than substantively driven. And to your point, this time gives students an opportunity to use their resources to dig a little deeper and understand both themselves and the place. So I think it's a great idea. I as we wrap things up here, is there a resource that you would point families to learn more about how Bucknell is forging ahead despite the crisis situation? A website that you want to perhaps shout out about?
Sure. I mean, I think a great place to start is to just Google Bucknell admissions, and our front page has some great information. It also has a link at the top of the page to, you know, every update we have about COVID-19 and what we're doing. So I think just starting there, you can get a good sense of some admissions information, but then also how we're tackling everything right now as an institution. And then from there, hopefully you'll be able to uh, poke around a little bit and get into your interests a little bit more.
Perfect, perfect. Well, thank you very much, Kevin, for joining us. The wonderful insight. I appreciate the work, the good work that you and your colleagues are doing at Bucknell to make this process an easier one for the students who are affected by the, the crises at hand. And I'm sure things are going to land well for you in the fall. Um, for those of you who have joined us today, I hope this has been a useful conversation. And as we move forward, will join us for others in the future. In the meantime, be safe and have a great day. Take care. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you.